Having a super wide angle lens is so important as a videographer. You want something fast, wide, and easy to use. Today, I have the ultimate wide angle prime lens for the Sony system that you can use for vlogging, talking head videos, and pretty much all around it's just gonna be a fantastic video lens. And that lens is the Sigma 20mm f1.4. Yeah, that's right, it's an f1.4. And I'm gonna tell you about my experience using this lens for the past 3 weeks. Thanks for coming over, and it's good to see you. Now let's go ahead and get rolling. All right, so first off, let's talk about the build quality of this, and then we'll take it out on the street and see exactly how this lens fares for things like vlogging and for everyday practical use. First off, let's walk around this lens. Let's talk a little bit about it. This lens that I'm holding in my hand is for my Sony E Mount. I've been using it for 3 weeks, and it's really great because it has an aperture that can go as wide open as 1.4, but it also can close down to f16. It does have an aperture ring, as you can see right here, but it does have a clickable and a declickable switch. Now it also, which is really nice, has a lock feature right here. So if I click this, it now frees up the aperture to be moved. When it's clicked into place, you can either have it go between the f1.4 or the 16, but you can't get back to auto. So you'd have to then unclick this or click it off, and you could turn this thing back to auto. And then once you lock it again, it's going to lock in auto, which is really kind of nice. So this way you're not accidentally going to knock yourself out of auto. And like I said, it does have the clickable and declickable. Here it's currently, we got the clickable and we have the smooth, non-clickable feature. So when it's clicked off, that means that it's a lot easier as a videographer to go ahead and be able to change your aperture without having steps. You can, as you're coming in and out of bright and dark situations, you can open and close that aperture and your viewers won't see the change. It will look more like a smooth, seamless transition versus if you change the aperture during the middle of your shot on your camera, it's going to jump the exposure up or down. This thing does have 2 SLD elements. It also has 3 spherical elements as well. And the lens front does have a super multi-layer coating on it, and that's to help reduce ghosting and flares and things of that nature. Now this thing is an autofocus lens, so it does have a stepping autofocus motor. It also has the ability, and I'm going to show it to you right now, it has the ability to, at a click of a switch, you are able to change from manual to autofocus, which is really kind of nice. But the really sweet feature on this is it does have a focus hold button, which most lenses have, which is kind of nice. It also has this manual focus lock switch. So if I go ahead and I turn this lock switch on, and I'm currently shooting in manual focus, no matter how much I turn this ring, it's not going to change the focus point. This is really great, and we'll talk a little bit more about the practical uses for this lens a little bit later, but this is really great because you can set your manual focus and lock it in, and then your manual focus is not going to change. Sometimes when you're maybe shooting B-roll or something like that, you might accidentally spin the focus ring and it's going to knock your shot a little bit out of focus, where once you get that focus, you can lock it in. So this way, no matter how much you spin this ring, it's not going to change your focus, which I absolutely have enjoyed and loved using this feature. Now this thing has 11 round aperture blades, so it's going to give you some nice creamy bokeh. Now this thing has a huge front element. This thing is 82 millimeters. So the nice thing is if you have 82 millimeter filter threads, you don't have to do any step up rings. You could literally just take the filter off one lens and put it onto another. Very convenient because then you don't have to carry around a whole bunch of step up rings. So what's really nice too about this lens is it has this cutout in the back here where you can put in rear filters. So that's kind of nice too. If you want to just have a constant rear filter in here, you could do that as well. And that's automatically going to knock down some exposure or put some polarizer on there or whatever you want to put in the back here. This rear gasket is semi-water sealed, so you do have a rubber gasket here, which is going to prevent dust and moisture from getting into your camera. If you're living in a harsh environment, you can put this on to one of your Sony cameras and you don't have to worry about dust or moisture getting in there and potentially ruining your sensor. Now, one of the things about this lens is it weighs 22 ounces or 630 grams. So this thing is going to be pretty hefty. It's a hefty piece of glass. Now, Sigma's known for having heavier lenses. They're definitely heavier build quality and a nicer build quality than some of your cheap third-party knockoffs. But this thing is going to run you $899. Now, if you were comparing this to, like, let's say the Sony Sony 20mm f1.8, you do lose a stop of light here going from a 1.4 to a 1.8 if you decide to go with that Sony model. It's going to cost you $100 more to have the Sigma lens. Like I said, this is going to run you $899. You can usually pick up that Sony lens for about $799. Now let's talk about image quality. I can tell you that I absolutely love using this lens. In fact, why don't we do this? For the rest of the video, why don't we get the heck out of this studio and let's go ahead, shoot some footage around the house, and I can tell you exactly and show you exactly what the image quality looks for this lens. Let's go ahead and hit it. All right, welcome outside. So the image quality on this thing is really nice. It's got that Sigma flare, which I absolutely love. And currently shooting at f2.8. I did stop down a little bit to get to that f2.8 aperture. All right, so this thing has amazing colors coming out of it. I absolutely love using the Sigma lenses. I think they do a great job of getting you some beautiful images. Now, the type of uses you can use with this are, of course, vlogging. Vlogging is definitely going to be something that you're going to use. Now, I do have the active crop on, so let me go ahead and turn that off right now, and you can see what 20mm would look like. So active on, steady shot off, steady shot, active on. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a crop here. It definitely does affect your image a little bit. Now, again, as you're vlogging here, you're definitely going to lose a little bit with that crop in. Sometimes you want to see a little bit of that background. So going all the way down to f1.4 may not be the best solution for you. Maybe going to like a 2.8 or an f4 might work. But I can tell you that this setup is pretty heavy when you put this lens on here. I mean, this lens is almost as big as my Sony 16 to 35mm f2.8. And that thing is a zoom lens, so you can actually get a little bit wider. I can tell you that the image quality coming out of this lens is definitely tack sharp. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it looks absolutely fantastic. Other uses that you have for this lens is you can shoot stars with this thing. So this is going to be a great astrophotography and astrovideography lens. You're going to be able to stop this thing down to f1.4 and be able to capture some beautiful stars. And having that manual focus, autofocus switch, and then ultimately that manual focus lock is definitely going to help. So once you get those stars in frame, then you can go ahead and lock it off, and you won't have to worry about accidentally bumping it and knocking those stars out of focus. Now, what's also nice about this lens is that it is a great establishing lens. So you can get a great establishing shot by using this lens. You can get nice and wide open when using establishing shots. This lens has a little lip around it, so this way you can actually put like a lens heater on here. So if you're out shooting those stars, you can actually put a lens heater on here. This way your lens won't fog or become an issue when you're out shooting. And speaking of being out shooting, especially when you're out shooting stars, this thing is going to be a low light beast for you. This is the only f1.4 that I can find on the market that's a 20mm focal length. So this is going to be your fastest aperture. It's going to be best for low light, and having low light capabilities can be clutch when you're out there shooting stars, just shooting a wedding in general, or shooting anything around the house. So I can tell you this. So shooting around the house, sometimes it's dark. I live in an area that during the winter we'll generally see about 14 to 17 hours worth of darkness. So when you're around the house, you're a lot of times using those natural standard light bulbs that are coming in your lamps. And what's been nice is going down to f1.4, I've been able to get a lot of low light and keep this thing at the base 640 ISO on my Sony a7S III. Now, keeping things at a base ISO and still being able to use S-Log3 has been a huge reason why I picked up the Sony a7S III and also have the Sony a7 IV, because when you can keep things at the base ISO and be able to shoot with the 10-bit 422 color that comes in both these cameras, it definitely makes a more pleasing image. Now, before I get into the downsides of this lens, which of course every lens has some sort of downsides, do me a favor. If you're liking this review, go ahead and hit that like button, that subscribe button, the bell notification down below so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. But first, let's talk a little bit about the downsides. Now, first things first, this thing is a heavy lens. So it's a pretty heavy prime lens. So if you're gonna be using this thing for like family videos or vlogging or some of that nature, and you're gonna be hand holding this thing, it's gonna be kind of heavy. So you're gonna have a little bit of a struggle when you're out using this lens. But you are gonna get some really nice wide views coming from this lens, which is really nice and really handy. And like we talked about, it's really good in low light. Now, because of that extra weight, it's bulky, it can be heavy, it can be a little bit of a strain on your arms. And to be honest with you, it's not as heavy as my Sony 16 to 35mm f2.8, but it's just as big. I mean, size comparison wise, these two lenses are about the same height. So you're not gonna be saving any volume space in your bag. You're gonna still have the same size volume. Compare that to the Sony 20mm, that lens is definitely a lot smaller, a lot more compact, but you're not gonna get that f1.4 aperture, which is what you're going for with this type of lens. Now finally, the final con with this lens is sometimes 20 millimeters can be a little bit of a weird focal length. Sometimes it can distort the face. A lot of times you want to have maybe a 24 or 35 millimeter to get less of a distortion. As I move closer here, see how my face kind of longs out. Can get a little weird if you get a little too close, but if you stay a good distance away, you are going to be able to find some very pleasing images. Listen, I'm going to go ahead and leave links down in the description below. If you're thinking about picking up this lens, feel free to use those links as they are affiliate links. They do help support the channel. Or if you just want to check it out a little bit further, go ahead and use those links. They made it really handy for you to get access to this lens. I do want to thank Sigma for letting me try out this lens, as it's been a joy to use for the last 3 weeks. If you have any comments or questions that you want to make, go ahead and leave those down in the description below, and I'll try and answer all those. But if you like this video, I'm sure you're going to like the video on the screen now. It's about another lens for your Sony camera. Before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you in the next one.